Hello, welcome to Lecture 3, the first of 2 lectures on themes of art. Today we will be looking at how the themes of religions and rulers are frequently invoked by artists and what kinds of effects, purposes, and meanings these works create. As always, feel free to pause this video at any time to take notes. Art has long played an essential role in religious worship. Works of art can be used to express powerful beliefs and ideas that cannot be literally seen in the real world, but can greatly affect the thoughts, emotions, and actions of real people. Art can give a physical, tangible, and visible form to something more ethereal and abstract. And this ability helps explain why art has been so crucial for religious devotion. Works of art can give believers visual representations of spirits, gods or deities, and sacred figures. Works of art can also contribute to the dissemination of religious beliefs through the spread of images throughout communities. You'll see on this slide 3 broad categories that you can use to understand some of the ways we will see artworks functioning to promote a sense of spirituality, or a kind of connection people feel to the world around them and to the larger purpose of the universe beyond their current space and time. These categories include artworks that incorporate specific gods or deities, works that reflect communication with the spiritual world, and places that have a sacred character. Deities are sacred beings or gods. Art is an effective way of giving specific features to deities for believers and viewers to utilize. And art also can help illustrate the qualities, history, or less visible aspects of these holy figures as well. Having an image of a deity allows the believer to feel closer to it as well, reinforcing the important role and constant presence of a religious figure and belief in one's life. For instance, here we have an image called Ratnasambhava, the transcendent Buddha of the South. We see the Buddha seated cross-legged in the center of the image, with a number of other figures and animals framing him in all directions. The Ratnasambhava is one of 5 Dhyana Buddhas, also known as meditation Buddhas, that are holy figures from within the branch of Tantric Buddhism that spread throughout the Himalayan region of Central Asia. This deity is associated with awareness or consciousness, which is emphasized by its features here. The upturned palms of the hands, the meditative seated pose, the content expression on the face, and the reverence and attention paid to him by the surrounding figures all suggest to viewers the significance and special status of this figure. Notice that he is also much larger than the other figures. Here, hierarchical scale is helpful to designate the religious deity for viewers to concentrate on. Deities and gods are not only displayed in art to showcase their importance and their particular qualities, they are also portrayed in order to encourage a spiritual connection with viewers. In many societies, individuals will rely on religious authorities, priests, shamans, oracles, and the like, to communicate with gods on their behalf, often with the assistance of specific objects or images. In other circumstances, individuals can use artworks to connect directly with gods, using the imagery to facilitate rituals or prayers or other actions that bring them to a state of closeness, which can vary greatly from society to society and individual to individual. In this slide, we see an icon, or a small devotional image, of the Virgin of Vladimir, which depicts the Virgin Mary holding the baby Jesus. Although there are many versions of this icon of the Virgin Mary, this one is believed to be the oldest of this kind. On many occasions, this icon was employed to bring protection and blessings to the city of Moscow, where it was brought in the 14th century. She is known as the Lady Who Saves Russia among many believers, highlighting the impact that this one image is believed to have on the actual events in the world. In this sense, the image not only gives viewers an idea of the attributes of the religious figure, but it also holds agency over their lives, creating a real sense of connection between the believers and the Virgin. Specific places can also hold religious and spiritual significance. Sacred places may be spots where holy individuals lived or visited on earth, or spots where believers can experience a particularly strong connection with ancestors, spirits, or deities. Both objects and architecture have been used for centuries to designate these sacred places. For example, this brilliantly decorated chapel is actually one large reliquary, or a container that holds the remains of a holy figure or an object that touched this holy figure in his or her lifetime. Specifically, Sainte-Chapelle once housed the relic of the crown of thorns, an object Jesus Christ wore at the time of his death. By being the site of this relic, this space takes on a sacred significance, and the construction of this elaborate chapel emphasizes this fact. The stained glass windows create a colorful experience inside the chapel as the light shines through, making visitors feel as if they are touched by the divine. Of course, commoners in the 13th century could not afford and would not have been allowed to own their own precious relics. So they visited chapels such as this to pay their respects and receive the powers and blessings the relic may bestow by being in its close proximity. Other sacred places are made sacred because of the religious and spiritual actions that take place within them. Here we have the Great Mosque of Cordoba in southern Spain. It does not house a holy relic or mark the place where a holy figure once stood, but instead is considered a sacred place because it is a space where people of the community gather to worship together. We can see how large the mosque is from this bird's eye view, but we can also get a sense of the unique effect of this space by looking at one feature of its interior. The rows of red and white striped horseshoe arches create an intentionally dizzying effect. Coming into this space out of the bright Spanish sun would have been disorienting, and gazing up at the colorful columns and arches would have intensified this experience. Considering that this space is intended to be a prayer hall, where individuals would collectively pray, this physical and psychological experience would help prepare a visitor's mindset and emotional state to be more humble and reliant upon God. Here we see the sacred space working to affect an individual's religious devotion through the employment of visual and physical details. The other theme we will look at today is the portrayal of rulers in art. Just as there are many different ways to use art to connect to or express individual, spiritual, and religious beliefs, there are so many different ways to use art to communicate political power and authority, as well as to command and persuade people to adhere to a particular social order. We will look at a couple examples to understand how rulers have used art to portray themselves as powerful, regal, and even godlike, and what purposes and uses those portrayals serve. One of the most popular ways to convey a specific message about a ruler is to document the ruler with a portrait. Oftentimes, rulers will have themselves depicted in an idealized and attractive manner to make them seem more appealing, but they also tend to use a number of other attributes to help make themselves seem important and in charge. Many times they are enthroned or pictured in an important physical space associated with their power. They are dressed in exclusive attire reserved for royalty. They are placed centrally in the image, and they are often larger than other visual elements, making them clearly the most important element in the scene. For instance, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian knew the importance of his regal portrait as part of his campaign to increase loyalty to him throughout the large geographic expanse of his empire. This is an enormous mosaic made of colored tesserae, or pieces of glass, located in the most sacred altar space of the Church of San Vitale in Ravenna, a beautiful city on the eastern coast of Italy. It served as the western capital of the Byzantine Empire, with Emperor Justinian ruling from his seat of power in Constantinople, now Istanbul, to the east. It is unlikely that Justinian ever actually set foot in Ravenna, but he wanted the citizens of Ravenna to know that he was in control anyhow. By being placed in royal purple robes in the center of this religious ritual, known as the Eucharist, and by being given a golden halo that hovers around his crown, Justinian is clearly portrayed as the most significant person here. Even though he was not a religious figure, his portrait occupies an important religious space to remind viewers that the emperor, and not the church, was really in charge of things. Just as Justinian wanted to send a message of his supreme rule over other entities within his empire, many rulers before and after him used portraits of themselves to send a message of their sole right to rule. This absolute power was not shared with anyone and was thought to be divinely given to the royal individual, and thus unquestionable by the mere mortals he ruled over. Perhaps King Louis XIV of France used his regal portrait to portray the sense of absolute power better than most. Here we have an enormous canvas, over 9 feet in height, that shows nothing but the king and his opulence. Everything, from his stance to his attire to the lavish decorations around him, reinforces a message of elegance and wealth, showing his economic power and success. Additionally, his sword and scepter are clearly visible, reminding viewers of his control over the military forces and the political system as well. He shares the space with no one else, and no other entity or institution of French society gets a spot here at all. In fact, Louis XIV liked this portrait so much that he had the artist and his assistants make several copies to distribute to his relatives and allies occupying other royal courts in Europe at the time. Our last theme regarding rulers branches out to include those who can lead and command others, but may not necessarily be true political rulers in the sense that emperors and kings are true leaders of specific communities or countries. Our works can offer viewers examples of allegorical leaders and common individuals who establish themselves as rulers by taking on important social roles and political tasks. Many of these types of rulers can be shown protecting the people, defeating their enemies, or brokering peace, among other actions. We will finish here with an example of an allegorical ruler depicted as a leader of the people. Delacroix paints a version of liberty as a fearless woman marching forward in front of a crowd of individuals from all walks of life in solidarity with each other. She raises the French flag, signaling whose side she is on, and glances over her shoulder at the multitudes of French citizens behind her. Although she is not a real person, but instead is an allegorical representation of the ideal of liberty, she carries a commanding presence in this scene. Delacroix hoped to document the passion with which the French people rose up and fought to preserve the hard-won liberties and freedoms they desired from the tyrannical rule of their monarch. And in turn, he also created an inspiring image that seems to call the viewer to arms as well, eager to fight alongside their fellow citizens. This concludes Lecture 3, Themes of Art, Religions, and Rulers. As we work through historical content in subsequent weeks, we will return to many of the concepts mentioned here and elaborate with more specific context to work with.